I spent 40 years building the life I thought my family would cherish long after I was gone. I worked overtime shifts, clipped coupons, stretched meals, and saved with the kind of discipline only a widow learns. Every dollar I tucked away felt like a promise that my son would never struggle the way his father and I once did. But promises don't mean much when trust is gone. The morning everything shattered, I was sitting at my kitchen table, sorting recipes I hadn't touched in years, when my phone buzzed with a banking alert. I almost ignored it. I wish I had. For just one more peaceful minute, before the truth arrived. Transfer request, $140,000. My heart stuttered. For a moment, I wondered if my aging eyes had finally betrayed me. But when I tapped the notification, the numbers stayed the same. $140,000. Scheduled to leave my account. Not by accident. Not by fraud. By my own son. The realization didn't explode. It hollowed me out. I went cold, then hot, then still. So still I could hear the ticking of the old kitchen clock Richard hung up 30 years ago. I waited to feel disbelief, denial, something motherly. But what came instead was clarity. A sharp, merciless clarity. Before I go on, if you love true, personal stories like mine, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now let me tell you what really happened. Because in that moment, staring at the attempted theft of nearly my entire life savings, I understood something devastating. I had spent years grieving my husband, and without knowing it, I had let myself become blind to the sun standing right in front of me. Shock gave way to numbness. Numbness hardened into resolve. I stopped being just a mother that morning. I stopped excusing. I stopped overlooking. I became a witness. And if my son thought I would sit quietly while he drained my future, he was about to learn what happens when a woman like me stops trusting and starts preparing. Dinner was coming. And so was the trap. The bank representative's voice was soft, almost apologetic, the way people speak when they're afraid the truth might knock you over. Mrs. Hale, did you authorize a transfer of $140,000 to an account under the name Hale Strategic Holdings? My last name. My son's business. For a moment I didn't answer. I couldn't. My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth, and my hand tightened so hard around the phone that my knuckles turned white. I forced myself to breathe, slow, steady, quiet. That breath carried 40 years of sacrifice with it. No, I finally said. I didn't authorize anything. There was a pause on the other end. A polite, dreadful pause. I see. Then I believe we need to discuss some activity on your account. Activity. Such a gentle word for betrayal. I listened as she explained what she saw. The login from an unfamiliar device, the scheduled outgoing transfer, the authentication carried out using a secondary access holder. When she read the name aloud, my son's name, I felt a tearing inside me, like someone had reached into my chest and pulled a thread loose. I didn't argue. I didn't demand answers. I simply thanked her for calling, hung up, and stared at the phone like it had spoken a prophecy. My son. My only child. The boy I raised with soft hands and iron expectations. After Richard died, the grief swallowed both of us. Or at least I thought it did. Looking back, maybe it only swallowed me. Maybe it sharpened him. Because in those first months without my husband, I leaned heavily on my son. I let him simplify things for me, my accounts, my online access, the endless paperwork that comes with death. He sat at my dining table, clicking confidently through bank portals, telling me I shouldn't worry about the details. All standard, Mom. I'll handle it. I remember signing forms through blurry, grieving eyes. I remember trusting him because he was my son, and because I was too tired to imagine a world where he might hurt me. Somewhere in those signatures, he added himself as a joint holder. Somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing my money as mine. As the shock settled into something colder, memories bubbled up, small things I had brushed aside. A gym membership I didn't recall joining. A withdrawal made across town when I'd been home all day. A new label on one of my online accounts. Future planning. When I asked him about the strange charges the first time, he laughed it off. Mom, it's probably a mix-up. You always forget to write things down. I accepted that explanation. Because grief makes you doubt yourself. Age makes people doubt you too. And love is the biggest blinder of them all. Now sitting at that kitchen table, everything fell into place, ugly and precise. The patronizing tone. The slow takeover of my passwords. The daughter-in-law's little digs. We should really help you organize things before it gets too confusing, Mom. Their eagerness to streamline my accounts. The way they joked about how complicated older people's finances get. They weren't helping me. They were softening the ground. And I, like a fool, kept offering them the shovel. I remembered the afternoon he leaned against my counter with that warm, artificial smile. You shouldn't have so many savings accounts. It's messy. We can consolidate them. Make things easier on you. Easier on me. No. Easier on him. The $140,000 transfer attempt wasn't an impulsive act. It was a culmination. A plan rehearsed in polite suggestions and sugar-coated concern. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the realization that my son had looked at me. At my age, my grief, my loneliness, and seen opportunity. I pressed my palms against the cool surface of the table, steadying myself. I had two choices. Collapse under the weight of the betrayal, or stand up and face it head-on. I chose to stand. Not as a mother. Not as a victim. As a woman who had finally understood what was happening to her. And if my son had been planning this quietly, he had no idea what kind of quiet I was capable of too. Because while he thought he was closing his hands around my future, I was already beginning to trace the shape of the trap I would set for him. Dinner was coming. And for the first time in my life, I would meet my son not with maternal softness, but with evidence, intention, and a sharpened kind of courage. The deeper I sank into my memories, the clearer the pattern became. Like a water stain that had always been on the wall, but only now, under the right light, revealed its true shape. This wasn't the first time my son had crossed a line. It was just the first time the line was bright enough for me to see. For months, maybe longer, there had been little signs I shrugged off as aging, forgetfulness, coincidence. Now each of them returned with sharp teeth. I remembered the first strange charge, a monthly gym membership I never signed up for. I laughed when I saw it, imagining myself in tight leggings on a treadmill. I called my son to ask about it. Mom, you probably clicked something by accident. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. He sounded amused, gentle, like I was adorable for not understanding computers. He didn't remove the charge. I noticed that later. Then came the withdrawal from a bank branch across town. I was home that entire day, fixing the hem on my favorite curtains. When I mentioned it during brunch, my daughter-in-law gave me a pitying smile. Oh, Mom, maybe you went and forgot. Happens to everyone. Everyone. But somehow only my account was the one losing money. I began checking my purse compulsively, counting dollar bills twice, questioning myself in ways I never had before. When people treat you like you're fragile long enough, you start cracking in the exact places they tell you you're weak. But it wasn't just the charges. It was the language. Little comments that passed like breezes but left cold drafts behind. Mom, you always misplace things. You can't keep all those passwords straight. You're too trusting. Let us help. Don't worry, we'll handle the complicated stuff. Each remark delivered with affection, but shaped like a leash. My daughter-in-law specialized in those sweetly poisonous lines. She'd say them over wine, smiling at me like a mother speaks to a tired child. Once, after I'd forgotten to bring dessert to a family gathering, she patted my hand and said, "We'll just add that to the list of things we take care of for you." The list. As if I had become a responsibility rather than a mother. I kept telling myself they meant well. That they were young, busy, overwhelmed. That condescension wasn't cruelty, it was ignorance. I tried to believe it because the alternative was unbearable. Then there was the day my son asked for help with a temporary tight month. I transferred money without hesitation. Then another amount a few weeks later. Then groceries. Then I paid a medical bill he casually mentioned in passing. I didn't realize I had become their emergency fund. Their safety net. Their quiet solution to whatever financial mess they created. And they thanked me with jokes. Yes, Mom's our unofficial retirement plan. She'll outlive us all. Her money certainly will. If only we could get her to simplify those accounts. Everyone laughed. I smiled. But inside, something withered. When I started noticing the comments, the patterns, the entitlement, I bought a small black notebook. I told myself it was to help me remember. But I wasn't forgetting. I was documenting. I wrote down dates, exact phrases, small things that made my stomach twist. Each time they dismissed my confusion or gently nudged me toward letting them manage things, I wrote it down. Page by page, the truth built itself. They weren't helping me, they were conditioning me. The final brick fell into place the day my son logged into my computer without asking. I'd stepped away to answer a call, and when I returned, he was staring at my banking screen. "You really shouldn't leave your passwords written down like that," he said, shaking his head. "What if someone took advantage of you?" Someone. He meant himself. At the time, I brushed it aside. Now that memory burned. That was the day I realized he didn't see my accounts as something that belonged to me. He saw them as something I wasn't capable of handling. He didn't see a mother anymore. He saw an opportunity. And my daughter-in-law. The way her eyes lit up when I mentioned possibly downsizing the house confirmed it. "Oh, Mark and I could help with that. We'd love to keep the home in the family." In the family, which meant in their name. Everything was moving toward one goal. Control. Quiet, gradual control. When I saw the $140,000 transfer attempt, it wasn't a climax. It was a confession. Every small manipulation had been leading here. But they made one critical mistake. They counted on me being confused. They underestimated an old woman. And nothing ignites my spine faster than being underestimated. My son had started a quiet, careful theft. He didn't know I had already started writing a quiet, careful plan of my own. The moment the bank alert appeared on my phone, time thinned into something sharp. I remember staring at the screen, blinking once, twice, hoping the numbers would rearrange themselves into something less monstrous. $140,000. Pending transfer. I tapped the alert again, as if repetition might change reality. It didn't. Instead, it showed me the destination account, my son's business, and an authorization timestamp I knew I hadn't touched. For a second, everything inside me went silent. No heartbeat. No thoughts. Just a heavy, ringing stillness. It was the kind of silence you feel right before a storm rolls in. When the air itself holds its breath. Then the world rushed back, too fast. My hands trembled. My throat tightened. I tasted metal, the way you do when fear meets anger. I set the phone down gently, like it contained something explosive. In a way, it did. There was no room left to pretend. No space for motherly excuses. No grief to hide behind. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't oversight. This was intent. I walked to the kitchen sink and turned on the cold water, letting it run over my wrists until the shaking eased. My reflection in the window startled me. Not because I looked older than I remembered, but because I looked awake for the first time in months. My son had used my trust like a password. He'd used my grief like a smokescreen. And I, who had balanced freight accounts for nearly 4 decades, who had sharpened pencils down to stubs to make the budget work, who had survived widowhood one painful morning at a time, had been treated like someone who couldn't tell a scam from a shadow. A strange calm washed over me. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Clarity. If he had scheduled that transfer once, he would do it again. And if I confronted him now, he would lie. He would gaslight. He would tell me I was confused, overwhelmed, misremembering. Anything to protect himself and his ambition. I needed proof, not confrontation. And I needed a plan. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and sat back at the table. I looked at the phone again, not with panic this time, but with purpose. I wasn't going to collapse. I wasn't going to plead. I wasn't going to ask why. I was going to document. I was going to prepare. And I was going to let him walk straight into the truth he had created. He thought he could take my savings quietly. He didn't know I was about to become very, very loud in all the places that mattered. Dinner was 2 days away. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. The morning after the transfer attempt, I woke with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Widowhood had left my days hazy and slow, but now every thought snapped into focus. I moved through the house with purpose, touching surfaces not out of habit, but strategy, checking what could be hidden, what could record, what could capture the truth my son thought he owned. By noon, I was sitting in the small, book-lined office of the only lawyer I trusted, Helen Tran. I'd known her since she reviewed our wills after Richard died. She was sharp, composed, and allergic to injustice. Qualities I suddenly needed more than anything. She looked up from her desk as soon as I stepped in. "Irene? You look resolved. What's happened?" I set my folder down with both hands. "Helen, I need you to pretend you're me," I said quietly. "And tell me what you'd do if your son just tried to steal your future." Her eyebrows rose, but she didn't laugh, didn't soften, didn't give me that pitying tilt of the head everyone else had adopted since Richard passed. Instead, she opened the folder and began reading. When she reached the transfer alert, her mouth tightened. When she saw the screenshot of my son's name listed as joint account holder, she cursed under her breath. When she finished reviewing the pages from my black notebook, she closed it gently, like handling evidence at a crime scene. "Irene," she said, "this isn't confusion. This is a coordinated move. And if he succeeds once, he'll do it again." "I know," I whispered. "Do you want to press charges?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want him to tell the truth himself. I want him to confess in his own words. I want him caught so cleanly he can't spin it." A slow smile crept across her face. "Then we build a trap." The two of us spent the next hour crafting a strategy, quiet, precise, and airtight. First, Helen drafted a new account summary, showing only a small remaining balance in the joint account. The real money I had already moved into a private trust under her guidance. The fake statement was perfect. Correct fonts, formatting, watermarks, everything. We planned to leave it somewhere visible at the upcoming dinner. "Bait," Helen said. "Evidence," I corrected. Next, she handed me a slim black recorder, so small it could hide under a napkin. "Click once for record, twice to stop," she said. "But you won't need to touch it. I'll be listening in live." I blinked. "Live?" She nodded. "You'll have cameras, correct?" "I have a few," I said. A few was an understatement. The house Richard and I shared all those years had always felt too big for just me once he died. So I'd installed small cameras for safety. One in the entryway, one in the living room, and one in the dining area. I'd barely thought about them since, but now they were exactly what I needed. "Good," she said. "Position them carefully. We want clear audio and sight lines of anyone touching that folder." She helped me plan the angles, the placements, the timing. We mapped out the entire dinner like a tactical operation. When the wine should be poured, where the folder should be set, which questions would encourage my son to talk, which comments would make my daughter-in-law reveal what she knew, how relaxed I needed to appear, how patient I had to be. "You're the one in control," Helen said. "Not them. Not anymore." Hearing those words from someone else lit something in me. A small, fierce ember I thought had died with my husband. By the time I left her office, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. But instead of feeling small under them, I felt taller, sharper. A woman no longer shrinking to fit the motherly mold I'd been shoved into. When I got home, I went straight to work. First, I tested all my cameras. I polished the lenses, adjusted the lighting, checked the battery levels. Then I placed the pen recorder in the buffet drawer, hidden behind the stack of dessert forks. Its tiny red light blinked once before going dark, armed and waiting. Next, I walked through the house twice, once as myself, once imagining I was my son. I studied the rooms the way he would, scanning for anything unusual. I shifted a lamp, moved a vase, adjusted the bookshelf so the tiny lens nestled between two old travel guides had the perfect view of the dining table. I rehearsed conversations in my mind. I practiced my smile in the hallway mirror. Not the warm, maternal one he expected, but the calm, neutral one that revealed nothing. And finally, I prepared the dinner menu. Traditional, comforting dishes he associated with my softness. Roasted chicken, fresh rolls, glazed carrots, a lemon tart cooling on the counter, a table set to look like a mother's welcome instead of an ambush. I wasn't doing this out of pettiness or spite. I was doing it because people like my son believed women like me aged into helplessness, that we became too slow, too soft, too trusting to defend ourselves. He didn't realize that age doesn't weaken everyone, it hones some of us into steel. Standing in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by evidence and strategy, I felt that steel settle into place. He had built his plan on secrecy. I would build mine on documentation. He had set the stage for theft. I would set the table for truth. Dinner was the next day. And this time, I wasn't the one walking in blind. The day before the dinner felt strangely quiet, like the house itself understood what was coming. I moved through the rooms with deliberate steps, checking the cameras one last time, straightening the tablecloth, polishing the silverware Richard and I had received as a wedding gift nearly 4 decades earlier. There was something ceremonial about it all, but not in the way holidays or birthdays used to feel. This was preparation, positioning, steadying myself for a battle that would take place over chicken and potatoes. In the afternoon, my son texted me. "Mark. Hey mom, just checking in. We're still good for dinner tomorrow? Thought we could talk about simplifying your accounts. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." A little thumbs up emoji sat at the end, cheerful and hollow. I stared at that message until my vision blurred. Not from sadness but from the sheer audacity of it. He was confident, comfortable, entirely certain that I was still stumbling around in the dark. I typed back 2 words. Perfect. Dinner. His response came instantly, another thumbs up and a heart. The heart nearly made me laugh. The performance of it. The casual way he dressed betrayal and warmth. An hour later, my daughter-in-law chimed in. "Jenna, do you want me to bring that quinoa salad you love?" The same salad she'd watched me choke on 2 months prior while commenting that everyone forgets their allergies eventually. I replied, "Bring whatever you like." But what she was really bringing was her part in the story, her remarks, her knowledge, her complicity. After those messages, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, letting the steam rise against my face. The house was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence I used to cherish. But now it felt charged, as if each piece of furniture had become a witness to what was about to unfold. As I sipped, I let my mind drift, just for a moment. Memories of Mark as a little boy hovered in the doorway of my thoughts. The way he used to tug at my sleeve when he was nervous. How he cried on his first day of school, and clung to my waist. How he used to ask, "Mom, you'll always be on my side, right?" I pressed my hand against the warm surface of the mug. I had been on his side for 42 years. Through scraped knees, failed exams, breakups, layoffs, and every poor decision he'd made as an adult. I had held him together more times than he would ever admit. But love, real love, doesn't mean letting someone walk you to the edge of ruin. And he had pushed me there without hesitation. By early evening, I turned my focus back to preparation. I walked through each room again, checking camera angles, reviewing my plan like a conductor readying for a performance. Nothing out of place. Nothing that would draw suspicion. On the dining table, the folder Helen had prepared sat in its designated spot. Visible but natural, plain but damning. A simple manila folder holding the truth like a coiled spring. I placed the cloth napkins beside each plate, smoothing the fabric with slow, steady hands. There was a strange calm in these motions, almost meditative. Not the calm of peace, but the calm of readiness. As night settled in, I stood in the doorway of the darkened dining room, letting the quiet settle around me. Tomorrow, I would look my son in the eyes and watch him reveal everything he'd worked so hard to hide. Tomorrow, I would stop mourning the boy he used to be and face the man he'd become. Dinner was no longer a family gathering. It was the stage on which truth would finally speak for itself. And I was ready, steadier than I had been in years, to listen. The afternoon of the dinner arrived with a strange, electric stillness. I moved through the house like someone preparing a stage, checking each camera lens, each cable, each angle. Everything had to be perfect. Not dramatic, not suspicious, just present, quiet, watching. By 5 o'clock, the roast chicken was already in the oven, filling the house with smells warm enough to mask the cold intentions beneath them. The table was set with the plates Richard and I saved for special occasions, because tonight was one, just not the kind anyone would celebrate. As I placed the last fork down, the doorbell rang. I took a slow breath, the kind you take before diving underwater. When I opened the door, there stood my son, smiling like he hadn't tried to strip me of everything I owned. He held a bouquet of supermarket lilies, white, overly fragrant and personal. "Hi, Mom," he said, leaning in for a hug. I accepted it, even though his arms felt unfamiliar. Too loose, too careful, like he didn't want to wrinkle his shirt. Jenna stood behind him, glossy and polished. Her heels clicked against my hardwood floor like tiny hammers as she walked inside without waiting for an invitation. "Dinner smells amazing," she said, looking around the room with a smile that never reached her eyes. She didn't see the camera hidden inside the vent above her head. She didn't notice the recorder pen tucked in the buffet drawer. She didn't spot the subtle shift in my demeanor. Why would she? They believed I was still the same soft, disoriented woman they'd been grooming for months. They didn't realize I had sharpened. We moved into the dining room. Mark set the lilies on the counter like a peace offering. Jenna wandered toward the sideboard, scanning the setup like she was taking inventory. The folder sat exactly where it needed to be, neatly beside the wine glasses, looking perfectly mundane. She glanced at it, uninterested, and moved on. Good. Everything was working exactly as planned. Sit, I said cheerfully, gesturing to their places. The cameras captured every angle. As we settled at the table, I served the chicken and poured the wine, pretending to be the mother they expected. Warm. Obliging. Grateful for their presence. Jenna buttered a roll and said, "You look lovely tonight, Mom." Lovely. As though she hadn't tried to erode my sanity piece by piece with condescending little comments. I smiled anyway. "Thank you, dear." The performance had begun. Mark leaned back, relaxed, swirling his wine casually. "We wanted tonight to be a chance to talk about your finances," he said gently. "To help make things easier for you." "Easier how?" I asked, passing him the potatoes. He cleared his throat in that practiced, faux professional way of his. "Well, you've got so many accounts. It's scattered. Complicated. It's safer if everything is consolidated." Jenna chimed in. "Absolutely. We just want to make sure nothing gets misplaced." Misplaced. Like my memory was a purse with holes in the bottom. I nodded thoughtfully. "And how would that work?" Mark smiled, as if I'd just asked him to explain the rules of a board game. He reached into his pocket and slid his phone across the table toward me. "Actually, I've already started the process." There it was. The screen lit up, showing a pending transfer, $140,000, waiting to be finalized. To his business account. He watched my face, waiting for panic or confusion. I offered him neither. I just tilted my head and asked softly, "What's this for?" He spoke smoothly, confidently. "It's an investment strategy. High yield, low risk. I'll grow it for you. Protect it. Future-proof your finances." Jenna nodded eagerly, eyes shining. "It'll be under our umbrella. You won't have to worry about taxes or fees. It's just easier this way." Easier for them to steal everything I had left. I set down my fork. And when would I see the money again? Mark laughed. A light, patronizing laugh that made my stomach twist. "Mom, come on. Don't think of it like that. It's family money now." There. The confession. Not forced. Not prompted. Voluntary. I felt the recorder pen practically humming inside the buffet drawer. I kept my tone gentle. "Family money," I repeated. "I see." The cameras caught Jenna reaching for the wine, sipping too quickly, her eyes drifting back to the manila folder. Hook, line, sink. She spoke with feigned innocence. "What's that on the sideboard?" "Some kind of statement." I lifted it with a casual shrug. "Just something I was looking through earlier." I handed it to her, watching her eyes flick across the fake account summary Helen had crafted. The one showing only a small balance left in the joint account. She frowned. "I thought there was more than this in here." "We," she said. "We." Mark didn't flinch. "That's only one account. he said lightly. I already moved the other funds. You know, to protect everything. Every word came out as though he were explaining how to load a dishwasher. I sipped my wine. So to be clear, I said softly, you moved my money into your business account. Without asking. Mark paused just a beat, one split second of discomfort, before recovering. It's all legal, he said, shrugging. I'm a joint holder. Technically, anything in there is ours. Technically. Their favorite word. Legal sugarcoating for a moral crime. I nodded as though considering his explanation. Well, thank you for explaining, I said calmly. You know me, I like understanding things. Jenna leaned forward with a bright, brittle smile. Transparency is everything. She didn't realize how transparent they were being. Mark launched into an enthusiastic monologue about returns and investments, his hands moving animatedly as he bragged about the future he was building, using my life savings as the foundation. Jenna added little compliments about his intelligence. He's really got a head for numbers, you know. I nodded. Oh, I see that clearly. And they kept talking. Oh, how they talked. They outlined their entire scheme over roasted chicken. Never noticing the blinking red light beneath the buffet. Never sensing the shift in air as they dug their own grave with each confident sentence. By the time I refilled their wine glasses, I had everything I needed. Arrogance is loud. Entitlement is even louder. And tonight, both were speaking at full volume. My son thought he was sealing his future. He didn't realize he had just sealed his fate. Dinner wasn't even half finished. And the trap had already snapped shut. The deeper they sank into their own story, the quieter I became. I didn't need to guide them anymore. They were navigating themselves straight into the abyss, step by careless step. Mark carved another slice of chicken, chewing like a man satisfied with the world he believed he'd engineered. Every few minutes, he glanced at his phone, waiting for the familiar buzz that would confirm the transfer had cleared. It never came. He tried to hide his growing irritation, but I knew his tells. His jaw clenched. His breathing shifted. His fingers tapped the table a fraction too quickly. All the signs of a man losing control. Strange, he muttered, checking the banking app again. It should have processed by now. Jenna leaned over his shoulder, her perfume drifting across the table. Maybe the bank is slow today, she said, though the uncertainty in her voice was unmistakable. They always lag on weekends. It's not the weekend. Mark snapped before catching himself. He forced a laugh. I'm sure it'll go through soon. I folded my napkin neatly on my lap. Technical issues happen, I said softly, letting concern lace my voice. Maybe it's for the best. Big transfers can be tricky. He didn't hear the undertone. He was too focused on trying to refresh the app for the 5th time in 10 minutes. I refilled Jenna's wine. She accepted it with a tight smile, her eyes bouncing between me and Mark as though trying to decode the sudden shift in the room. The confidence she walked in with was beginning to crack at the edges. So, I said gently, you've been planning this transfer for a while? Mark's fork paused midair. Well, yes. I mean, kind of. You know, I've been thinking about reorganizing your finances. Without telling me, I replied, still sounding thoughtful, not confrontational. Just curious. He gave a dismissive wave. It's not like that. You know, I'm just trying to protect everything. To manage things better. I see. I murmured. And Jenna? You knew about all this? Jenna froze for a heartbeat too long. Of course, she said with feigned composure. Mark keeps me in the loop about everything we do for you. Everything we do for you. She didn't realize how revealing that phrase was until it slipped out. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the camera above the vent to catch it. I nodded as though her answer comforted me. Well, I suppose it's good to know what's happening with my finances. Mark bristled. Mom, you're making it sound like something's wrong. I met his gaze steadily. Should I be worried? That question hit him harder than any accusation. His eyes narrowed, calculating. For the first time tonight, he wasn't fully in control, and he felt it. No, he said too quickly. You're overthinking it. Jenna reached for her glass again, fingers trembling just enough to betray her. Outside, the evening light faded, casting long shadows across the table. The shift in atmosphere was subtle but unmistakable. The warm glow of family dinner had dissolved into something colder, sharper, more exposed. The recorder pen blinked silently from its hiding place. The cameras watched from their corners like patient observers. And my son, my grown, confident, unshakable son, sat sweating over a transfer that would never go through, trying desperately to maintain his performance as it unraveled system by system, lie by lie. The snare had already closed. They just hadn't realized it yet. Mark's phone buzzed, finally. He glanced down, expecting relief, maybe even triumph. But instead of a confirmation, his face twisted in confusion. What the? He refreshed the screen, tapped again, harder this time. It says the transfer failed. Another tap. Why did it fail? Jenna leaned in, voice trembling. Maybe you typed something wrong. No, he snapped. I did everything right. He did everything right, except assume his mother would stay powerless. I reached for the dessert plates, letting the silence stretch just a moment longer. Then I set them down gently and said, before we finish eating, there's something I'd like you both to sign. Jenna blinked. Sign. Mark let out a strained laugh. Mom, what kind of paperwork are we talking about? The kind you appreciate, I replied. Transparency, right? Documentation. He swallowed. Something in my tone must have shifted, because he straightened in his chair, alert now. I walked to the buffet and picked up the manila folder Helen and I had crafted with such precision. The cameras caught it. The recorder pen listened. I placed it in front of him. What's this? He asked. Just a summary of what you explained tonight, I said calmly. So we're all on the same page. He flipped through it lazily, too lazily. He didn't take in a single word before pulling the pen from his pocket. Sure, Mom. If it makes you feel better. And just like that, he signed his name at the bottom. Jenna didn't even look. She reached for her lipstick mirror instead, barely glancing at the page before adding her signature beside his. It was almost too easy. I slid the folder back toward myself, my hands steady, my heart strangely quiet. Thank you, I said softly. Mark leaned back. Anything else you want to document? I met his eyes. Just this. I lifted my phone, turned off the silence mode, and tapped send. A soft chime sounded from my screen. The sound of files leaving my phone and landing directly in Helen's inbox. What did you send? Mark asked, voice tightening. The confession you just signed, I said. The video recordings. The audio. Everything from tonight. His smile evaporated. Jenna's fork clattered onto her plate. You recorded us? I folded my hands neatly. I protected myself. From both of you. That's illegal, she barked. No, I corrected, my voice still calm. This is California. And fraud against a senior is a crime. What I did was documentation. Mark surged forward in his seat. Mom, what the hell is going on? Instead of answering him, I pressed one more button on my phone and placed it on the table. Speakerphone. The line rang once. Hello, Irene, came Helen's steady voice. I've received the files. Excellent clarity. The part where your son explains that the funds were family money now is especially helpful. Jenna's face drained. Mark's hands curled into fists. This isn't legal, he said again, but his voice shook now. Actually, Helen replied. Under financial elder abuse statutes, intent and access are enough. And your voluntary statements tonight provide both. The room went dead still. No clinking. No breathing. Just two people realizing they had walked straight into a legal buzzsaw. And handed me the switch. I reached for the lemon tart, slicing it cleanly. Dessert? I asked. Neither answered. The trap had been revealed. And now there was nowhere left for them to go. The silence in the dining room thickened until it felt like the air itself was listening. Mark's face had gone pale, an unhealthy, pasty shade I'd only seen once before, when he fainted during his wisdom tooth surgery. But this time, the fear wasn't from pain. It was from exposure. Mom, he finally said, voice cracking slightly, you didn't need to go this far. We could have talked. Mark, I answered. I did try to talk. For months. You were the one who decided secrecy was easier. His hands slammed against the table, rattling the plates. I was trying to help you. Jenna flinched. Her lipstick, once immaculate, now smudged as she rubbed her shaking fingers against her mouth. You were trying to help yourselves, I said quietly. And you know it. He opened his mouth to argue but stopped, because arguing would require honesty, and he no longer had any version of the story that wouldn't incriminate him. He looked toward the phone, where Helen remained on speaker. So what happens now? He asked, voice small. Are you pressing charges? Against your own son? I took a breath. This was the part I'd rehearsed more than any other. I'm not pressing charges tonight, I said. But Helen has everything ready if I decide to. All it would take is one signature. Jenna's breath caught in her throat, sharp and fast. You can't do that. Mark could lose his license, his job, his reputation. Jenna, I said, meeting her eyes. You were part of this. You encouraged it. You benefited from it. So don't talk to me about consequences. She looked away, her jaw trembling. Mark's voice was barely a whisper. So what do you want? The question every guilty person eventually asks. I folded my hands on the table. First, you're removed from every account. Permanently. You will never have financial access to my life again. He nodded stiffly. Second, I continued, you will repay every dollar you borrowed in the past 3 years. His eyes widened. Mom, that was documented, I said, cutting him off. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every emergency loan, totaling $23,800. He swallowed hard. And third, I said, my voice firm but steady, you two will stay away from my home unless invited. No more surprise visits. No more manipulation disguised as concern. I will not live under the shadow of your schemes. Jenna gasped, as though the very idea of losing access to me, and my money, had bruised her. Mark ran a hand through his hair, defeated. And if we agree? Then I won't sign the formal complaint, I replied. Not unless you give me a reason to. The weight of those words settled in the room like dust. For a long moment no one moved. Then Mark nodded once, slow and reluctant. Fine. If that's what you want. It's what I need, I corrected. He stood, pushing his chair back too quickly. Jenna grabbed her purse with shaking hands. Neither said goodbye. The door closed behind them with a dull thud that echoed through the hallway. I stood there in the quiet dining room, breathing deeply, letting the tremor in my hands fade. Years of fear, guilt, and denial finally loosened their grip. For the first time in a long time, I felt something unfamiliar. Not relief. Not triumph. Just strength. And it felt like reclaiming a part of myself I thought I'd lost forever. When the door finally shut behind them, the silence that settled in my house was different from the silence I'd known since Richard passed. This one wasn't empty. It wasn't lonely. It was clean. Like someone had swept through my life and cleared out a storm I didn't realize had been gathering for years. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the chair Mark had pushed back so abruptly. A small part of me, some ragged motherly instinct, wanted to rush after him, to offer comfort, to smooth over the damage. But the larger, wiser part of me stayed rooted where I was. He had walked out, and he had earned the weight he now carried. I began clearing the table slowly, methodically. Each plate stacked felt like a layer of tension being lifted. When I moved the empty wine glasses, the faint fingerprints on the rim made me pause. Those prints weren't signs of family warmth anymore. They were reminders of betrayal. After loading the dishwasher, I returned to the dining table and sat in the same chair where I'd faced them. For the first time in months, my heartbeat felt steady, unhurried. I exhaled, and the breath didn't tremble. The house was quiet, but I wasn't alone. Strength sat with me. Clarity sat with me. Richard's memory sat with me. And none of them felt heavy. Later that evening, I received a brief text from Mark. Mark, we need space. We'll talk eventually. No apology. No recognition of the damage he'd done. Just distance disguised as maturity. Oddly, I didn't feel hurt. I felt free. The next morning, I met with Helen in her office. She had printed copies of everything. Recordings, transcripts, the signed confession, the timeline, every digital footprint. She slid the stack of documents toward me. "You have leverage now," she said. "More than enough." "I don't want to destroy him," I replied softly. "I just want him to stop destroying me." She nodded. "Then we hold on to this. And if he ever tries again, we act." A simple plan. A fair plan. A boundary made of steel. After I left her office, I drove through the old neighborhood where Mark grew up. I passed the park where he learned to ride a bike, the school where he won his first spelling bee, the ice cream shop we used to visit on Friday nights. Each place stirred something in me, but not grief. Just perspective. Love doesn't vanish when trust breaks, but it changes shape. I returned home and sat on the porch, letting the afternoon sun warm my face. For the first time in years, I felt grounded, centered. Not waiting for the next problem, the next emergency, the next manipulation. Just present. Later that evening, I cooked myself a simple dinner, an omelet and toast, and ate it peacefully, with the quiet hum of the refrigerator beside me. I realized something as I washed the dishes. Yes, I had lost some illusions that night, but I had regained myself. And that exchange, painful as it was, felt like a kind of justice. A justice I had delivered with my own hands. A justice I no longer felt guilty for claiming. The storm had passed, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt safe in my own home again. In the days that followed, I found myself waking up earlier than usual, not out of worry, but out of a strange, gentle calm. For months, maybe years, I'd lived in a fog I didn't recognize. A fog built from grief, trust, and the quiet denial only a mother can sustain. Now that fog had lifted, and what remained was clarity. I spent the next morning sitting at the small kitchen table Richard built me in our early years. The sunlight hit its surface the same way it always had, but I saw it differently now. It felt like a reminder that even in the later chapters of life, there are moments that sharpen you instead of soften you. I opened my new private account records, real ones, with numbers intact and protected, and a slow wave of relief washed over me. Everything I had worked for, sacrificed for, saved for, was still mine. Not because someone handed it back to me, but because I chose to fight for it. A choice I never imagined I'd have to make against my own son. People talk about motherhood as though it freezes you in time, as though once you love someone, you lose the right to defend yourself from them. But standing up for my future didn't erase my love for Mark. It didn't rewrite history, or wipe out the memories of his childhood laughter. It simply redefined what love required now. Boundaries. Accountability. Distance if necessary. Self-respect always. One afternoon, as I tended to the tomatoes in my small backyard garden, I thought about the night everything unfolded. About the cameras, the confession, the silence that followed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt wise. Life has a way of testing you even when you think your hardest tests are behind you. But sometimes the most painful truths lead you back to your own strength. And that strength? It's worth protecting. A week later, I received a short message from Mark. "Mark, we're thinking things over. We need time." I didn't reply immediately. Not out of anger, but out of peace. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some end with understanding of yourself, if nothing else. And this story, mine, ended with a woman who learned she wasn't fragile, foolish, or fading. Just older, wiser, and finally in control. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you enjoy powerful true stories like mine, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There are many more ahead.